Bom dia, boa tarde. Eu sou Débora Drucker, da EMBRAPA, e junto com Filipi Soares, do INRAE, França, estarei coordenando esse painel. Ele será em inglês. From Fair Data to Agricultural Data Spaces, Initiatives and Lessons Learned. O painel vai ter duração de 1 hora. Unfortunately, our speaker, Sérgio Serra, had some health issues in the last minute and is not coming. But we are honored to have Clement Jonquet from INRAE. He will be the first presenter. And then we are also, after Clement's talk, which will be about 15 and 20 minutes, we're going to have Roberto García from Universitat de Lleida, Spain, for more a talk that will follow. And then we will have the discussion that will be led by Filipi and I. So, starting our first presentation, Clement Jonquet is from INRAE, the National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment in France. He has a PhD in informatics and is a senior researcher in INRAE. His talk presentation title is Semeando Dados, Colhendo Conhecimento, Semantic Approaches for Data Interoperability in IOSC and SIATs. So please, Clement, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. So nice to be here. I'm actually sharing the room with one of the co-organizers right now. We are in the same room in France, and give me 1 minute and I open the slide and we should be good. Just working out a little bit this platform, but it should be okay. Give me 1 second.
Thank you very much, Clement, for accepting our invitation. We are honored to have you here.
And yeah, okay, it doesn't seem to see exactly. Okay, give me 1 second again. Just want to be sure I can share my screen, but not necessarily the full screen mode. And that's exactly what I'm. Worst case scenario, I'll be sharing the non-full screen mode. And okay. And I think you guys probably see here the non-full screen, the thing. And if I do that, any chance you see my slide full screen?
No, we are seeing your presentation mode.
The presentation mode. It doesn't switch to the it doesn't switch the balance in this case.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's good. Well, we see the slides below, but it's okay. It's large enough.
We'll do it a little bit back because I'm struggling putting it full screen, and I'm even a little worried that it's not this. Okay.
No problem. No problem at all.
You'll see the one coming next, but I see it too, and it's going to be useful for me. Okay, don't be scared. They use 41 slides. I do my best to go them fast and try to be as efficient as I can. So bom dia, boa tarde. I was in Brazil about a few weeks ago, so it's my pleasure also to be there and present today, and hope everyone will be okay with English. I haven't been in Brazil for so long that I still need to speak English. Still, I've tried to I've given a few presentations in Brazil, including at EMBRAPA, including with multiple partners. I want I reuse some of the slides here, and I especially reuse the title that I like very much, that tell us semeando dados and cogiendo conocimiento. The idea about transforming the data into knowledge is very much something that is at the core of my work, trying to in the agricultural context, transforming those the data into knowledge that the machine can actually use and leverage for decisions and actions. So just to say a word about me, I'm a research scientist at INRAE, France, in Montpellier. And we do research in different domains from data science to AI, and also applied to the knowledge engineering field, especially developing products around the use of ontologies, as you will see in the presentation. So quickly, if I say a word about the talk today, I just want to start introducing the talk about with a few data-driven experience or scenarios, example of things in the agriculture area. And then I'll say a few words about semantics and ontologies and ontology repositories. This is at the core of the work that we are doing here in my group, and present two programs that I think could be interesting for like a congress like yours on agricultural informatics. Those programs in Europe are called EOSC and SEEDS, and I'll say a word about it, and my colleague Roberto will probably also complete for the SEEDS project. And then I'll present more concretely the platform that we are developing in my lab called AgroPortal. So let's go. Just wanted to mention an important context we have in France called Digitag, which is an institute for like digital agriculture, and I can provide more information about it. But if you Google in France Digitag Montpellier, you'll find a lot of research activities that have been done around digitalization of agriculture, including some of the work that I'm presenting here. My colleague Véronique Belon-Morel was the head of this program that has supported multiple research activities over the years. So I'm starting with a couple of examples like that. So one slide, one example. This is an example from a former PhD where we were interested in formalizing the process of doing all of the actions that are necessary for different crops, for vegetable crops in agroecology, and formalizing all of the action and the planification of which crop a farmer will plant on the same plot right after the one before, and also taking into consideration the history of the plot and also the history of the knowledge of the plants. And we took for that a knowledge graph approach, building something like you see on the right, a knowledge graph, on which we were able to formalize the data and the knowledge related to this data, and then make a decision, like you could see here in the screen, it's in French, saying, well, after those crops, then we move to this one, then we make a decision on the next one. And that was really a knowledge-driven approach with a knowledge graph, and there is a core ontology that has been published also related to this work. In another example, this one is from a colleague of me, which is super close here in the lab. In France, we have those health bulletins that are communicated to farmers on a regular basis, like every month or every 2 weeks, and that contains a lot of information for farmers to decide if they should do something like cut, plant, if disease are coming in, what's the weather forecast for like the next weeks, etc. And those are containing a lot of interesting information for us. So we have a project that consists of extracting the knowledge out of those PDF files, image, tables and titles and things like that, and once again build some kind of a knowledge graph. And for each of the objects that we want to put on the knowledge graph, when we want them to be formalized in specific ontologies, and those ontologies will once again be the tool that we will be able to help to formalize the knowledge that we will extract from those PDFs. So making the machine able to understand the content of those PDF by formalizing that into a graph. And then once again, taking decision and helping our farmers and taking decision. And the last example is, which is actually very much linked to this one, for the phenological stage that we would observe, for example, in the photos related to grapes. Here, viticulture is for grapes. Then we needed and so we study what we call phenological scales and produce, and those scales are made of different stages that the plant have for different crops. There are multiple, and in the case of wine, for example, we're able to formalize in a language that the machine will be able stage of the progression of the plant. And once again, that was done with an ontology that and distribute them. So if you have never heard about ontologies, just take them as a formal representation of classes and concept and relation between this concept in the domain that you're trying to capture. And that formal level means that a machine can actually parse this content and do something with it and reason and do some classification. Semantic web and ontology has been a field of AI for 40 years. That's typically what we call symbolic AI, capturing the knowledge into figures, into representations. I mean, the issues with ontologies and vocabularies at large is that they are spread out, different formats, the very higher numbers of them. They are formalized in different language, and they are very often overlapping one another. And so there is a challenge in working with those multiple ontologies, sometimes being done in the domain of agriculture, others in the domain of forecasting or soil management, and also food, etc., etc. We need to gather them and facilitate their use. So why ontology repositories? So database for those ontologies are important because they help you find out where, if an ontology is any good. If you want to share one, you can publish it and make it available. If you want to find one, then the repository helps you to do it. It helps you make the connection that is so important between data resources and ontologies and the ontology themselves. Overall, the idea is how can you use those ontologies, those artifacts that the machine can use to enable new science without managing them and dealing with them on a day-to-day activity. And for these, we develop what we call ontology repositories. And our motto, our goal was to demonstrate that making those ontologies and those vocabularies available in these repositories help them to become fair objects. So you may have heard about the FAIR principle, the fact that data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and that data should be described with fair vocabularies. That's also a point of the FAIR principle. Then in the context of this research, we are trying to say, well, the data on our side are the vocabularies produced by the others, and we want to make them fair. We want to demonstrate they are fair. And for that, we develop portals, and the screenshot that you see under them, facilitating the different aspect of FAIR, they come from AgroPortal and OntoPortal, the generic technology behind it. So I'll say a few words about AgroPortal at the end of the talk, but basically it's a product developed in the group here at INRAE and University of Montpellier before that allows you to share, publish, search, download. We deal with the content of those ontologies, which means that if really someone capture a concept, then we will figure out a way to find out this concept and then connect this concept to other concepts in other ontologies, use an annotation service to annotate some data, find out the most appropriate rock ontologies using a recommender, etc., etc., making the community around the development of those ontologies alive. And that's really the goal of AgroPortal, which is a platform that is now up, has been developed about 10 years ago and still being developed and actively maintained and innovate. This is done in the context of a broader project in which the technology behind AgroPortal called OntoPortal is being reused in multiple communities, including in astronomy, biodiversity, ecology, earth sciences, and biomedicine. Originally, it was based on BioPortal that was done at Stanford University. But we are in that vision that working on a generic technology, we can also support different communities, increase the semantic uptake of ontologies globally. More information about that OntoPortal Alliance, if you're part of the person or interested into the technology in itself. I've been exchanging with people in Brazil that are producing so much ontologies in different projects in Brazil that we might actually use the Ontoportal technology for hosting some Brazilian resources, but that's future. Well, so what about the context of this research quickly? I just mentioned 2 projects, and I have 2 slides for each of these 2 big projects or program. The first one is a project that is done in the context of a European program called the Common European Data Space, and the European Commission has foreseen that we needed data space to formalize the exchange of data, and we needed such data space in different sectors, and agriculture has been identified as one. So agriculture taken as a sector of activity. The data space is supposed to encourage innovation and demonstrate that in this domain, the regulation that the European Commission has set up for data exchange is implemented and realized. And of course, when you talk about the importance of data exchange, then semantic interoperability comes to the picture. And so it's one of the reasons we are here. And so the project SEEDS has for role to implement the data space for agriculture in Europe, which is a federation of multiple data sharing initiatives or data space that already exist, federated into one. And we are participating into this project that I'm briefly describing here with like goals and objective. But the idea of the data space is to develop, of course, some or build on an infrastructure and a generate infrastructure, develop a system, but also creating the environment in which data sovereignty, security, exchange are also made available and secure, and also traceable using technology like the blockchain. We'll continue talking about the data space for sure in the other talk right after, but it's something that could be also interesting for researchers in this area in Brazil. And the second big program, which happened to be seen by the European Commission also as the data space for research and innovation, is called the European Open Science Cloud. It's the big cloud of service program that the European Commission is pushing to develop open science. And we are still working in this context of open science. At the core of open science, the fact of sharing data, we have the FAIR principle. At the core of the FAIR principle, we have the use of semantics. And I don't give too much detail on that, but see I'll skip maybe directly to this slide here. At the core of this program that is kind of very much interested in open science, which means fair data. Fair data means interoperability, and we have already discussed the fact that interoperability is very often enabled by semantics, and semantics needs ontologies and metadata. So that's why I end up in this program, because we provide ontologies and metadata for different communities, agri-food, but also others with Ontoportal. And so in the context of one project called Fair Impact, we were able to concretely address some of the requirements that the European Commission has set up for like interoperability, including working with semantic artifact and semantic artifact catalogs, which is a broader term we use for ontologies, vocabularies, terminologies, etc. So in this context, we were able to develop multiple activities around semantic artifacts, including like a governance framework for them, facilitating their creation, their mapping, their sharing, their reuse, and also their fairness assessment. We implemented measures to verify that the resources were actually fair, and that was done in the context of a work package that just finished about a year ago. The goal here was to mention the EOSC program and give you a concrete example of outcomes of this program. So this is the outputs that we have done concretely at the. I'll take the 5 last minutes maybe to focus on the concrete results that those projects are bringing in, which are the development of the platform that we use for enabling semantic interoperability at the core of data space or at the core of EOSC, and in other projects supporting people sharing ontologies. That's AgroPortal that I said I will mention and describe a little bit more inside the talk now. So we have around 340 candidate ontologies there, and the more we had ontologies in AgroPortal, the more we discover other candidates. So candidate means people publishing papers, scientists talking to us and telling us that they have ontologies at end that they want to share. And so I'm super excited about this project, because we know that we still have enough, not enough, but a certain amount of resources which is we have done half of the job. That's what I'm trying to say here. We still have a lot of resources that we've discovered, but we haven't worked directly with the communities or the people to upload them. But this is the ecosystem of agri-food really related semantic artifacts. In AgroPortal, you can browse those artifacts, discover them with a faceted search, multiple metadata component. We spend a lot of time curating the metadata and making a metadata model for AgroPortal Reach. You haven't seen them, but the project Fair Impact that I mentioned before has also worked on standardization of metadata of ontologies, and that's something for us which is important because we can leverage that in the product that we are developing like AgroPortal. The key idea will be that if you have identified the right term for you, for example, here, leaf area index, if you search, you'll find it in different ontologies. You can use that term in your data afterwards. So the classic use case will be for, you can, of course, find it in a given ontology and then move to a given ontology and then explore that ontology using a tree architecture that shows you the content of that ontology and how you can reuse that concept. What does it mean? How it has been used? So you can concretely say, okay, when I want to identify the forest area as a proportion of total land and sea in my forest, then I use the concept 0, 0, 20, 174. So this is really the clear use case of using ontologies. I mean, that other example illustrates how when people works with, that famous spreadsheet when that contains all of the data people want to annotate, then there are tools that we provide in AgroPortal that will support these, coming from this initial vigor term that you see on the left to that initial vigor concept that you will get in a reference ontology about cassava. So that's typically what we are doing with AgroPortal and supporting people annotating and describing their data. And this work has been in part done with partnership with our colleague of EMBRAPA. I think it was important for me to mention this work in the context of a Brazilian Congress, of course. But it's been a couple of years that we are working with EMBRAPA in taking their semantic artifacts, their resources, and moving them to a standard way of representing them, and including them in AgroPortal as a platform to share them eventually. We've been working on that in the context of, for example, a thesaurus developed by the Ministry of Agriculture in Brazil called Tesagro, that some of you may have heard, another one called VogGeo, and we are working right now on that big resource that EMBRAPA is maintaining for several years called AgroThermos. Well, that's more or less it, guys. Conclusion, and that was super fast on presenting also AgroPortal, but conclusion, just coming back to the presentation, I will say that, yeah, my speech is really about defending and pushing for the use of semantics and ontologies because it enabled data interoperability, it enabled the fact of transforming data into knowledge, and then being able to take decisions and formalize this knowledge. I mean, we have seen the importance of the explosion of AI, and we are foreseeing also what AI tools will be able to do with knowledge graph, with ontologies, and this is something we are also following in terms of computer science research. You've seen AgroPortal, which is a member of the OntoPortal family that we develop as a reference platform to share and use ontologies and semantic artifacts in agriculture. So I'm happy to share that information also with the group here. And if there are other groups and other parties interested, OntoPortal is a technology that we've developed also. Every use case, every community, every science or domain that comes in brings in new ideas. And so it's very much interdisciplinary work. And so we are happy also to work with new collaborators in this area. And that's all for me. I hope it was not too long and not too so I will take question after in the panel with pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Clement. I think Débora is coming in. A very interesting talk, and in the end we will open for questions. I already have my questions, but I think it's good to wait to listen to what Roberto will present to us. And I think we will have a very interesting discussion afterwards. Débora?
Thank you, Clement. It was great and just on time. I also have some notes here of questions to ask and looking forward to our discussion. And I'm also looking forward to our next presenter's talk. So now we have Dr. Roberto García González. Thank you very much, Roberto, for accepting our invitation. Roberto is an associate professor at Universitat de Lleida. I'm sorry about my pronunciation in Spain.
Really good.
And he has over 25 years of experience in research and innovation, applying semantic technologies in various domains. And I'm very curious to hear about his talk. It's entitled From Fair Data to Data Spaces. So please, Roberto, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again.
Okay, it's a pleasure, and thank you very much for the invitation. I hope you can see already my slides. Yeah, I think so.
It's
okay,
perfect.
So nice, thank you. So basically, what I will try to do is following with from Clement's presentation about the importance of semantics, ontologies, and so on. Our view also quite practical in the sense of, okay, we need data to make all that feasible, but usually we don't want to share our data. It's a precious. We know that there are many companies that are benefiting from that, so we want to keep it as much as possible under our control. And it is just what data spaces bring to the scene. And I will try to present our experience with a particular technology and a particular way of implementing a data space, that is this AgroSpy initiative. This is not an isolated effort. It is connected, for instance, with also a project that Clement presented before, that is the SEEDS, the deployment of the European Common Agricultural Data Space. We have been also involved in the preparatory action that was previous project, just preparing everything for this deployment. We are also in another project that is called Agri-Food Dev. In all these cases, this is this need of how we can make it more appealing for companies, especially to make their data available. We'll try to avoid the word share, because it's not about sharing, because in many cases you want to keep control on that. So how I can make or make it possible to use that data without losing control while generating value, because otherwise if I keep it, it's really difficult to make possible the full potential of all that data. And all this experience that we have with data spaces come from many years. In 2021, we started with one Spanish research call addressing this topic. And more recently, and this is the project I will focus on, is this experience. So it's a project where we try to put everything in practice. That is this AgroSpy or AgroSpy, depending the pronunciation. That is a project that is funded in Spain, part of an initiative of generating these demonstrators of data spaces. And also now there's a call that is to support companies and public administration, that is also very important, to come to these data spaces, so they have some funding for the expenses of joining these data spaces. And the objective is to create or bootstrap this ecosystem. So our experience with data spaces, I mentioned, we started with this Agri Data Space initiative, and we tried to drive all from what is the root of the issues, that is, I don't want to share my data. So taking into account the ethical, legal, and social aspects of sharing data, considering regulations at the European level, also the codes of conduct, that is another interesting asset that is common understanding between actors. There are this kind of code of conduct in Europe, but also in other countries. I'm aware in the US, in Canada, in Australia, they also have these share agreements between actors in the agri-food sector, involving also manufacturers, farmers, and so on, of under what conditions we are sharing or making our data available, as when we buy machinery, and that machinery is collecting data. How is that data governed, and how it can be used. And we analyze this from this ethical perspective, and we identified many aspects that should be taken into consideration when you develop these kind of information systems. So you also support the needs of all these stakeholders that are involved, so they don't get scared and just drive away of that proposed solution. And also very interesting was to see this survey to 1,000 Australian farmers. I think it's focused on Australia, but it's applicable to any part of the world, about their level of awareness about the terms and conditions, about the data collection agreements that they were subscribing when, for instance, using some sort of decision support system or machinery that was collecting data. Basically, most of them didn't know at all about what was the conditions they were agreeing just by the use of the service, but they were not comfortable at all that that data that was going to be collected was being to be used for the benefit of that company that was collecting the data. And also they were suspicious that this company was going to be sharing these with third parties. So it was quite contradictory that you are not worrying about something that you are sure or quite sure that is going against you or your interest. And this is something that happens in this particular domain of agriculture, but it happens to all us. In social networks, it's more or less the same situation for all of us. We have gone through this same process. We just accepted the conditions of the social network, and we are quite aware that they are going to use that for their own benefit and share it with third parties. So it's something that already has happened. So maybe here what we can explore is, can we avoid that also happens with the data that is generated, not personal data like in social networks, but with this data that is generated in agriculture, because it's quite sensible and it can be taken, this data, to make very decisions that have a very big impact, not just on farmers, but even on countries. And if this decision is made, or this data is collected from outside the country or accumulated outside the country, it can also drive decisions against our country. So it's basically a problem about sovereignty, not just at the country level, but also at the individual level. So we analyzed in agri-data space this particular topic from the perspective of different actors and taking into account the values that they appreciated and more impacted by the existence of this data sovereignty or not in the systems to be developed. We identified that basically the main concern was, especially from farmers, is on control. They want to be able to decide on how their data is used, and also very important that they want to have informed consent. So it means that every reuse that is done from their data is not a big document with 20 pages that no one is going to be reading before accepting to use that device or that system, but they prefer to have the last decision about a particular kind of use over the data. For instance, it's going to be used to train or by a specific system that then you can use, or it's going to be used by a university to do research. They want this kind of decisions informed at a lower level of complexity. So they can decide every time for every use, or at least at a lower scale, not accepting any kind of reuse through these big policies that no one is reading. So these were identified as the main drivers for building trust on this ecosystem of data sharing in agriculture. So we try to apply these ideas to the maximum extent possible, because we also wanted to explore how we can draw benefits, even economical benefits to the originators of the data. So that will be also an incentive. And the biggest problem that we saw is that of the control. That is something that happens as soon as you have something digital that can be easily copied. And the parallels that we use here is with music. It has a very big impact, digital music, because basically anyone can copy. So there's not incentive on buying the music. And this didn't revert for the music industry till they discovered, or just made this the central part of their business model, the streaming approach. So the idea is, can we have something similar also for digital data? So a mechanism that guarantees that we can keep control of the data, so it's not just copied away and then copied maybe hundreds or thousands of times without any kind of control from our side. So we explored this approach, and we use this method to explain it of the data room as a mechanism for sovereignty. So sovereignty by design. So the system is guaranteeing from the beginning that you will be kept in control of your data. So the idea is that it's a practice from the real world. You even have data rooms in the real world that are used when you are, for instance, doing a merge between companies or acquisitions between companies. You have these physical rooms where, for instance, the accounts of the company are kept there. And when you go into the room in order to know if you are interested in buying that particular company, you cannot get into the room with a mobile phone, taking pictures or take pieces of paper out of the room. So you can just get out with the knowledge that you can gain after looking at the data, because you want to keep that sensible information under control. So the idea is to have the same in the digital world. So you are in control of who enters to consume your data. In this case, it will be algorithms that are processing the data. And you want these algorithms to just take aggregated data at a level that keeps personal data or secrets under control, AI trained models, and so on. So that is more or less the objective of this data room. And there are technologies that allow us to basically perform that on the digital world. This is the technology that we choose for the implementation of our data space, and they call it, in this case, compute to data. And it's basically the computation moves where the data is and goes out just with the results. This also enables, and the technology we're using facilitates that you can monetize that data, because the data is not downloaded by the consumer. So if they need it again, they have to go through the data room. So then it makes sense to put a price on the data, because they are obliged to go through you in order to get value out of the data by processing it. And the system we are using is also enabling the monetization of not just the data, but also the algorithms that you build on that data, that are processing the data. Because we think also that is where most of the value will come from, and even the infrastructure. So you don't need, as a farmer, for instance, to have a computer where you will run that data room. You can also hire that as a service, and you must basically pay for all these three concepts when you are consuming a service through the platform. I just included here a diagram about the whole architecture of the whole thing. I just will point some specific things that is built on top of a blockchain technology, but not a public one. So not involving any kind of cryptos into the business. That is something that scares a lot companies. Is also based on the use of, for the monetization of a stable coin, so linked to a real currency, for instance, the euro, an electronic version of the euro. And right now we are not using real euros, just for playing around, but with that option in the future. So you can switch, and the monetization will be in real value. And on top of that, the mechanism for governing the access to the data, and also a marketplace that you can use to explore the data and services that are available on the data space. And I will go quickly through the more practical aspects. This is already available at that URL, and then by going there, you can explore the portal and the marketplace. And I will show just 2 use cases that we are currently deployed in the pig sector, because it's quite strong here in our area. I think also in Brazil, it's a very important sector. Basically, to show how the data space enables the use of the data, but guaranteeing that the originators remain in control. The first one is about using images from inside the farm, but made available just in that particular data room. So you are capable of getting access to the images inside the data room, derive, for instance, metrics about the well-being of the pigs, or the time that they spend drinking or feeding, and you just can download at the end, the consumer of this service, these metrics. Not any kind of image from inside the farm is leaked in this way. And another example is about information that is collected in the farm about precision feeding machines, also sensors that are available in the farm. The idea is that you can share this information as it is. We don't enforce any kind of format a priori to share the data. And even from that, it's possible to generate some services like this one that is generating by visiting the data of your farm, generating a report about the level of different gases in order to generate sustainability reports. This will be one of the services that are already deployed. And also another topic that Clement was also mentioning before is, in many cases, you will need to transform that data to a formats that facilitate integration. Here we are also using semantic technologies. So we have services inside the data space that allow you to map the data from the existing format to this semantic format that facilitate integration. There are incentives to generate these services because you can also monetize them. And also another thing that we're exploring is that you can then, this data, once it's mapped, you can integrate it and generate like data cooperatives that maybe are not just from one originator, but maybe many. Also how you can track then the shared ownership of that set of data, because this is one of the problems in agriculture, that usually originators, the scale is very small, so the value of the data, it's difficult for them to negotiate with that small amounts of data. Data cooperatives can play an important role here in order to give more negotiation power to the farmers or the originators of the data. And just some drawings about how we map this information using the technologies mentioned by Clement, these knowledge graphs. So we use reference ontologies or vocabularies to map that data. So even data from different aspects like feeding or daily weight of the sensors in the farm can be integrated all together into just one format that it can be exploited all together. And finally, I think this is one of my last examples. We are also exploring the use of generative AI. In this case, is a use case for the extracting data from soil analysis that basically are usually PDFs that are accumulated, that have different formats. It's very difficult to extract value from them in an aggregated way. So we are also exploring here the use of LLMs that are inside, let's say, inside the data room. So you are not leaking the information out. Everything is kept in a controlled environment. And the idea is that you can use these LLMs to extract semantic representations of the data. So you can integrate, for instance, from different originators, different companies that are generating these reports, different years, so you can create these aggregated knowledge graphs that provide you information about big areas and the quality of the soil and the evolution also in time. And finally, what we are working right now in SBI is basically on these data cooperatives that I mentioned before, and also in consent management. So it will be this informed consent that I mentioned before. So the idea is that you publish your data on the data space, and then you receive requests to reuse your data, and you can decide one by one, and the last decision will be made by the originator about if you allow or not that particular reuse based on the explanation and the motivation that they make for you to decide if yes or not you are willing to allow the reuse of your data. And that's all. Okay. I hope I didn't get too much time and we kept some time for the discussion at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto. It was great to have many points here noted. Filipi, would you like to start, or how do we?
Oh, the mic is shut. Yeah, thank you, Débora. We just had our mic shut here.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanking Roberto and Clement for the very interesting presentations. We've been discussing this with the Brazilian community for quite some time, especially Débora with GoFairAgro Brazil, on the importance of quality of high quality data sets, for agriculture. This is a conversation that, especially with these two presentations we had here today, that we can hopefully move forward to a next level. So in Brazil, we have lots of data about agricultural commodities being produced daily there in the country. But we still don't see data itself as a commodity. And I think with this whole idea of the marketplace, of the data spaces, we can start this discussion, So data has a value, and I think this is crystal clear here in Europe with all these projects that the Commission is promoting and endorsing. And in Brazil, we've been talking about this for very long, and this discussion in the public sector institutions is well accepted, but by the industry, they face, I think they still face some issues that Roberto has shown in his presentation, especially regarding data sovereignty and governance. And the data spaces, they bring exactly that kind of solution for the private sector. But in the other hand, we have another concern, the quality in terms of standardization of data semantics. So it's not only a matter of going to the fields and collecting data and creating data sets, but also working on these data sets to make them really high quality data sets that others can reuse, that artificial intelligence models can leverage to provide better outputs. So this is something that I really want you to see in the Brazilian community in the next years, developments in this sense of understanding that data has a value, not only, in this very generic abstract sense, but a concrete value, like you can trade the data as a natural commodity. But for that, you need first to do this checklist to work on semantics, but also to work with all the Brazilian regulation for guaranteeing the data governance and sovereignty. So that's what I would like to hear from you, what you think, what are your thoughts about it? And since you are the head of the GoFairAgro Brazil, it would be nice to listen from you now.
Thank you, Filipi, for your comments. These presentations that we heard today, I think they're really timely because we are starting to see similar initiatives over here. And the challenges seems to be very similar also, like the concerns about data sharing. I think that the idea of these data cooperatives that Roberto showed are really interesting. But I think, and that's something I would like to hear about our panelists. Maybe a strong difference here is that we don't have a funder or a commission like in Europe that is really pushing forward researching in this area of the interface between data and data spaces and data markets. So I would like to answer Filipi by asking a question. How much do you think that those initiatives that you have described, like the European Common Data Spaces and also the Open Science Cloud itself, how much it was pushed by the funder, the commission to make it happen, and how much of that is also a bottom-up initiative? How do you see it, and how much did you contribute to it?
Maybe I can say a word about it. Indeed, I have presented in a way where we feel that the Commission in Europe is helping us or putting that's the current situation now, and I think we can be thankful for those programs to be there. In terms of open science, a quick historical note can say, I mean, there have been a moment where all the universities and research academic institutions figure out that it was important to release data. So the first adoption was with open data, and from open data we went to open publication, open source code, and then eventually open data sets, and now we are talking on our side of open ontologies and making them available as any other data set. So that's really the argument to convince the public institutions and the public bodies that they should release their data in research, but also outside of the research area too. And another level of adoption that has supported EOSC very much in Europe is the fact that infrastructures, so infrastructures, a project that we're developing like concrete services for certain projects. So plant phenotyping, for example, there was an infrastructure project that was done, and then that infrastructure project turns into someday a component or an element of building that EOSC, because they are already helping out and supporting their communities. So check also with the Brazilian in the Brazilian ecosystems, what are the scientific infrastructures focusing on data that are needed and that have been developed. They will be the one directly connected to some actors, and if the governments and promote the development and of open science in their and has their infrastructure to do that, then that's very similar path. And for the data space, I would see probably another region, and Roberto will complete for sure. But the concern about farmers, ethics and data and governing, Europe is known to be the place where we set up the governance first and then the business second. But that's one of the philosophy that we have here. Before seeing the things and the data being taken from everywhere, then the European Commission came with an act that was mentioned in Roberto's slide to actually manage and supervise that. And what's interesting is that the technology that's being used, or the one that's mentioned, is not European specific. It's an open specification, and so all of the open specification will be available, and other countries can join in. Right now, it's the Common European Agricultural Data Space because it's founded by Europe and involving European actors. But what we have observed also in the consortium is that every countries have already started some kind of an initiative. to do, and so the European Commission comes and say, look, take those initiatives and now federate them into a global European agricultural data space. So in these, at that level here, you may also look into which sectors, for example, in agriculture in Brazil have already set up or is interested in figuring out their data exchange and trussing them down, and then eventually move to a federation of things like that. And yeah, so that's element of response.
Thank you, Clement. Would you like to add to that, Roberto?
Yeah, it's true that it's basically pushed by the Commission, but there are initiatives like International Data Spaces Alliance or Gaia X that are more driven by industry than the governments. So they have also some support and interest that I think it's also worth. And for instance, Gaia X started from France and Germany originally, but now it's expanding beyond Europe. Recently have been established Gaia X hubs in Canada and in South Korea. So it's an initiative that is going beyond that, and it might be an interesting initiative to follow, for instance, from Brazil, to explore if it might be interesting to create a hub of Gaia X in Brazil. I'm not aware, but I think there are many countries also in Latin America that are exploring also that option. And beyond that, that in many cases the technologies and tools that are being used are open source. Like the one that I presented is a completely open source project. In fact, it comes originally from the blockchain world. So usually in blockchain, you have to open all the code because otherwise you cannot build trust. Everything, the code is available. You can deploy your own instances of everything. It's also a nice way of starting experimenting, and you don't need the support of your government. It's not available. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I can identify at least one specific project that we have here at EMBRAPA that's called Semear Digital. It's aimed on agriculture, digital agriculture for small and medium farmers. That I will point to that material to my colleagues, because we are pursuing something very similar, and all this share ownership and everything that you presented, I think dialogues a lot with our purposes here as well. So we'll keep in touch. Thank you very much, Roberto. Filipi, do you have another question? Should we take one from the audience?
Yes, please go ahead, Débora, and take from the audience. I think Juliana has a question there. It's in Portuguese.
Yes.
Do you want me to translate?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Ask the Clement, but I think it can be both for Clement and Roberto. She's thanking for the very nice presentations and sharing the experience with them. She said that they have students there in Brazil, like bachelor, undergraduate students that are, being exposed to this topic for the first time. And she would like to know from you what tips and suggestions you have for these students to get started in this area. Also indications of works, of papers, anything.
Roberto, you take this one first.
Yeah, I can share, for instance, all the code that we are using, it's available online. If they want to go the experimenting part and are comfortable with programming, I can share in the chat the link to all the code that we are using. And apart from that, maybe from the semantics part, I think that Clement, you can contribute much more. But we have also some publications related with data spaces, open data in agriculture. I can also point all these in the chat.
Well, on my side, I would just say this is a good news that students that are exposed to the subject of data, the importance of data, the importance of data exchange, the value of data as a product. I mean, you remember the expression, data is the next oil, or things like that. And so continue to expose the student to that. You'll see also the revolution in AI that is very strongly based on the fact that these data are now available. And I don't know which subject I would, or maybe advice I could say on my side. I'm coming from a field that is called symbolic AI, and those days we have the idea that AI is going to makes our scientists and a bunch of jobs disappear, maybe even some farmers one day. I would just say it's important to continue being in control of what the machine is going to be doing, especially when we are in the context of this data space where we explain that we want to master what's happening on the data. And so it's important that when you consider your data activities as a student, you also consider that there is no magic that is doing something. Everything is explainable and concretely implemented when you do computer science. And so the approach that are a little bit more symbolic, explain, formalize, put things in graphs or in ontologies to formalize the knowledge, and that's a philosophy that I like, because it allows us to explain, trace down things, and in terms of going back the road, or who has done what on the data, what is the data telling me this through the AI, it brings you in. So career suggestions could be around simply around data science with a focus on explainability, AI, and not an AI that you will never be able to explain or justify. Yeah.
This is very interesting, because yesterday we had a keynote from a colleague from Yamin, and he delivered a speech about using IoT data to train a machine learning model to predict like the fertilization of wheat in the field. And when he was asked a very similar question, he said also to the students, focus on the data quality, because once you have data with enough quality, then you can make your algorithms work. Because it doesn't matter if you have the perfect AI model or machine learning model if you don't have the data with enough quality to make these things work.
Yep.
So it's very nice to have the similar recommendations here today as well. Débora, back to you.
Yeah, so we already exceeded the time, so I think we should be closing. Do you have any last thoughts, Filipi?
Well, my last thought is that just people watching us, and also from the association, I think there is a lot of room to explore future partnerships. Also to keep an eye on the grants that are upcoming, in between Brazil and Europe, and especially with the new trading agreement that will take place in January between Mercosur and the European Union. I think more opportunities will come up in the upcoming months. So let's explore all these opportunities for this cross-border, cross-Atlantic collaborations.
Yes, absolutely. I think we have many opportunities to collaborate, and it's great to have Filipi there with you, Tema. That it's also a connection, and Tema is already an habitué here also. So I think we can do more things.
And allow me to mention, maybe just as a little advertisement, you were talking students and trainings and collaboration. There is a brand new also memorandum of understanding or agreement between INRAE in France and USP in Brazil, and we know USP is an important structure. I mean, some of you are from the structure, and so we have a kind of a ticket or of a governance enabled or facilitated context to develop collaboration. So if you see opportunities, INRAE is very much interested, or we could find some interlocutors for this kind of collaboration. I mean, there are others with other area like EMBRAPA mentioned at the beginning, but this one with USP is kind of new. Digital agriculture is among the topic, for example, that are identified in this agreement.
Great, that's perfect. So I'd like to thank you again very much, Clement and Roberto. Thank you very much, Filipi, as well. It was great. I hope we will keep connected in the future also. And thank you also, Fernando, for allowing us to streaming here.
Okay, a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great end of conference.
Okay, the same. Bye.